pump the brakes on some excitement that they've got from a change in volumes. Eric, thank you for joining us this morning. We just talked a little bit about that news from Delta. Their cargo revenues down 36% year over year for the third quarter. Carriers are thinking, okay, man, this can't get much worse, right? And now as we're heading into peak season, are things turning up, or is it just kind of a false positive?
Good morning, Kaylee. Yes, false positive might be the way to characterize it. We've seen in the last few weeks in September, kind of the market volumes and rates coming up some. Basically, it seems like it's lifted off the bottom. We've been bumping. We finally found the bottom of the cycle after a long time, bumping along, started to lift up a little bit. But my analysis shows that, that seems to be just a little bit of a seasonal pickup that we would expect at this time of year. And even by seasonal standards, it's pretty small. And, we've got some tailwinds also coming from Golden Week celebration, week-long celebration in China where the factories are closed down and a lot of shippers want to get their freight out a little early. So they kind of pre-book airlines and capacity ahead of time. So now or while Golden Week's going on, you've seen volumes, kind of go back down. So we had Golden Week, you had Apple with its iPhone release and maybe some other tech releases. So we've got these little blips and signs of optimism. And I think, some people are reading a lot into that, especially after the International Air Transport Association recently came out with its monthly report saying that in August, air cargo demand was first time it was positive in like 19 months, that it grew 1.5%. But some other data providers showed, maybe 1 or 2 point declines for August, and also in September that, volumes have been flat. So if you take it all together, basically year over year, the market's still flat against a really weak peak season last year. So, I think, like you said, false positives or, take things in stride or with a grain of salt for a while.
And Eric, as we're looking at, of course, the macroeconomy, one of the big things that we're seeing a lot of retailers do are, of course, these deals to kind of entice some purchasing, some consumer activity. Will this have any impact on air cargo potentially as we start to see a little bit more deals pop up from time to time? Not so much just looking at these big spikes of, okay, Black Friday sale, going into Christmas, we have another sale, Cyber Monday, anything like that, but maybe these consistent little deals having to pop up. Are we going to see any impact from that as well?
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, that's generally, the reason why air freight is used to make sure you have stuff in place when you have some of these big, retail programs, and also for these big holiday season events like back to school, Halloween, Christmas. But demand is just lumpy this year, and the other thing I would say is, even though retailers for the most part seem to have finally corrected their overstock situation, there's it depends on the type of product, but more than that, the economy is there's so many mixed signals and so much uncertainty that a lot of retailers are taking a wait and see approach. They're ordering a little bit here and there where they need it, but they're not ordering to the same extent, or maybe they probably would have had to order by now. They didn't order as much in the summer. Because there's just so much uncertainty and they don't want to get caught in another overstock situation again. So we'll have to see. You never know. There could be a late minute surge to air to get things in, but right now it's not looking so much.
I think the biggest kind of takeaway from this is the fact that month on month, this might be positive, and certainly positive from the second quarter into the third. But year over year, these numbers are still really abysmal. And as you mentioned in your Delta story, it's kind of bad even compared to pre-COVID comps. Delta was underperforming for the third quarter even when compared to 2019, which was, again, a tough year for air cargo. As we continue to see some of these companies report for the third quarter and prepare for the fourth, do you think that that's a trend that we could expect to see from the majority of carriers, is the fact that not only was this bad when you compare them to the COVID years, that inflated economy we saw, but it's also bad compared to pre-COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I think, 2019 wasn't a great year for cargo. It was down from 2018. So some of the comps are, on par now with 2019. So that's in some ways that's good. In some ways, it's glass half full, glass half empty. But I think as these carriers report third quarter earnings, probably trend like it did in the second quarter. A lot of them, United, American, report later this week. And they'll probably be down similarly in percentage wise in their cargo revenue in the 30% range plus, as Delta was. And then you'll have some carriers that are especially in Europe and Asia, that may have even bigger revenue down shortfalls of 40% or more. So I think rates are a little, they're 20% higher in some places than in 2019, but volumes aren't great as a comparison. Yields are a little better, so that's good. But overall, the comps are getting very close to 2019.
And Eric, one of the things that we chatted with Grace Sharkey a little bit earlier this morning was around the state of the consumer. Can you talk to some of the impacts that student loan debt payments are going to have on this market?
Well, yeah, that's the point I tried to make in the article, that even though there's a little bit of an uptick in the air cargo, there's just not a lot. If you look a little further ahead and see some of the economic signals, there's still a lot of pressure on the consumer. So where's the big demand surge for a so-called recovery going to come from? You've got the consumer, the student loan repayments are starting in the U.S. Consumer spending's a little sluggish. I think some child care subsidies out of the pandemic have ended. Industrial production's still in contraction territory in the U.S. and other markets, although maybe improving slightly. So, and then you just have the interest rates from the Fed finally starting to wear on businesses, and there's this lag of where businesses, it takes time for these interest rates to trickle into the economy, and people to say, borrowing's expensive. I think I'll pull back on opening another storefront or investing in some machinery or hiring some new people. So that might, that's starting to take hold, and that could carry over into the first half of 2024.
A lot of interesting dynamics at play here. Eric, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks a lot, Anthony. Anytime.
Right now, we're going to toss things over to Kaylee Nix for a next look at today's weather.